Hi there, thanks for listening to this. This is our third introductory video on Proverbs, and we're so pleased that you've joined us. And we're just going to simply outline Proverbs because we mentioned at the end of the last video that Proverbs actually is made up of 7 collections. It's a very interesting way of looking at it. There are 7 collections within the book of Proverbs. Now remember, a proverb is not a promise, but it is what God says should be right, and it is the typical way that God operates. So you can't take Proverbs and say that you're always going to have everything perfect, but listen to the promises of Scripture and read other promises, and they need other scriptures to support them in this sense that trust in the Lord with all thine heart and he shall direct thy paths. For instance, Proverbs 3 verse 5 and 6. Well, that is a promise. But not all Proverbs tell you exactly what will happen in everybody's life. Bring up a child in the way he shall go, and he shall not depart. It doesn't mean that a child will never walk astray, but it does mean that children will be guided and directed by bringing them up in the things of God, and God will direct their paths if they follow him. Now, what about these collections? 7 collections really we have here. The first one is chapters 1 to 9, and the title that has been put on that is Discourses on Wisdom. Within that section you get the title of the book, the purpose of the book, the thesis of the book. You say, well, what's the thesis of the book? Well, just looking at the verse, I should have turned it up earlier, just thought I was on the button, but I wasn't. But verse 7 of chapter 1, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. So in other words, the thesis is that wisdom, the fear of the Lord, giving God his place, respecting the Lord, is the beginning of wisdom. And so we have within that section an instruction to young people from chapter 1 verse 8 to chapter 8 verse 36, some really important things there which we'll come to. We have wisdom and folly contrasted in chapter 9. Then you come to the second collection of Proverbs. The reason they're called collection is that it's not like a passage of scripture like the New Testament or an epistle where you can divide and subdivide and cut and paste. It's not like that. It's not in clear sections in that sense. There's pithy statements, and that's the whole idea, isn't it? A proverb is a snapshot of life. A proverb, the main word in Hebrew, means resemblance. It lets you see what life is like, it tells you what is typical, but it also helps you to understand something that is succinct and clearly stated. So come to the second collection, and over that I've got this heading here, Solomon's couplets expressing wisdom. So there are couplets, and you get from chapter 10 verse 1 to chapter 22 verse 16 things compared, whether it be to do with money, to do with value, to do with investment, the marks of wise living, how to please God, the fruits of wise living in chapter 13, further advice 14 and 15, how to trust God in chapter 16, peacemakers and troublemakers chapter 17, friendship and folly chapter 18, and so on. So that's the second collection. Third collection is 30 sayings of the wise from chapter 22:17 to 24:22. 30 sayings. So you get an introduction in chapter 22:17 to 21, and then the 30 sayings run through 22:22 to 24:22. So that's very interesting there to see that as well. Collection 4 is a short section, 6 more sayings of the wise, 24 verse 23 to 34, and then you come to collection 5, and collection 5 is chapters 25 to 29, Solomon's maxims expressing wisdom. So these are Solomon's words, and he gives you analogies to do with wise and foolish conduct. He talks about fools and folly. He talks about virtues and vices. He gives a discourse on prudence, self-control, and there's some instructive contrasts in chapters 28 and 29. Then you come to collection 6, and here's the wisdom of a man called Agur, A-G-U-R, Agur, and he introduces his wisdom about God, verses 2 to 9 of chapter 30, wisdom about life 10 to 33, which brings you to the final collection, which is the wisdom of Lemuel. Now this is a beautiful section. There's an introduction, and then there's the description of the wise king, chapter 31 2 to 9, and then there's a description of a wise woman, chapter 31 10 to 31. Now that's a beautiful way to finish this book of Proverbs, because it tells us about a godly woman and her life and how she lives for God and how she does stuff that is pleasing to God, how she respects her husband, how she brings up her children, how she provides for them. So fantastic stuff, really interesting, useful, helpful. And we're going to come back and work our way through some of the Proverbs and hopefully learn some really good lessons for our lives. So that's the overview, 7 collections. Do read it for yourself. If you haven't started yet, remember there are 31 chapters. You can read 1 chapter a day and it will stand you in great stead as you try to live your life for God. Thanks again for your attention.